Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video. Good morning, everyone. It's about 11 o'clock. We're going to get started. My name is Thomas Bowles. I'm the Extension Agent here in Prince William County, and welcome to this week's class, Fall Vegetable Gardening. I know fall vegetable gardening is important to a lot of you, both for producing healthy food and just because you like to garden and put things in the ground. So we're going to talk about that. But first, a few little housekeeping things. If you have questions, please put those in the chat box and we'll get to those at the end. For those of you who don't know, Virginia Cooperative Extension is a partnership between Virginia State and Virginia Tech. Our mission is to provide research-based information to the public. And here in Prince William County, we offer educational programming in parenting, financial education, nutrition, youth development, and environment and natural resources. At the end of this presentation, when you come out, there'll be a link for a survey. We ask you to fill that out. It helps us to be more accountable to our funders and to help us with programming in the future. We encourage you to enrich your soil, have healthy soils to help protect our waterways. If you need more information on how to build healthy soils or on soil testing, please contact our Master Gardener help desk at mastergardener@pwcva.gov. So into the meat of things. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about where we are now in the season. We're going to spotlight some late seed options. We're going to talk about ways to extend the season, and then we'll have the question and answer. So let's dive right in. Fall gardening really starts in the summer. We have here a calendar of different vegetables, different fall vegetables, and when they should be planted. And as you can see, a lot of them in this purple, sometime late July, early August is ideal. Unfortunately, this is where we are. So we're done, right? No. It limits our options, but it doesn't completely mean that we can't do some fall gardening. And today we're going to talk about ways, what we can grow and ways to get around where we are in the season. Some of the things that we can grow are things like radishes, spinach, garlic. We can put in cover crops. We can do sprouts and microgreens inside. There are a whole bunch of maybes depending on how we manage things. So let's take a look at some of the things that we can grow. First of all, there's radishes. They're easy to grow. Most of them have a really short growing period, and there are lots of different varieties. The downside to radishes is that particularly if you have kids, most people don't like radishes. And we have our quote from Homer Simpson for the anti-radish team, but radishes are healthy, nutritious, and can be prepared in a variety of ways. And if you are growing them in the winter, you can grow them outside. When it gets too cold for them to be outside, you can actually grow them inside in a big gulp cup. And they're really great for having succession planting because they have such a quick growth cycle. Spinach is another vegetable that you can grow in the fall. We can grow it for baby spinach, that is the young tender leaves, or adult spinach, if you will, the more mature leaves. Generally speaking, this time of year, we're shooting more for baby spinach, although if the weather cooperates, we can get some nice mature leaves. In terms of the cold hardiness of spinach, we have to think about how mature the plant is versus the temperature. And this is true of a lot of fall vegetables. If they reach a certain maturity point, then they're going to resist frost. If they're too immature, frost is going to damage or kill them. And spinach is one of those things that can be quite sensitive if they're a little bit young when we get our first hard frost. Garlic is something you may not have thought of. Garlic is actually a really good crop to grow over the winter. Typically, we plant it late September, early October, so we're right in that window. You can go into late October as well. Garlic is spaced about 6 inches apart, 2 to 3 inches deep, covered with soil, then covered with straw, and basically you forget about it for a while. It will grow a little bit until it gets cold. Then in the spring, when it starts to warm up, it'll start growing again. With young garlic, weed control is really important because those weeds are going to outcompete the garlic until it gets established. So you have to be careful about that. But other than that, garlic is really easy to grow. It's plant, weed, and forget, basically. So we want to harvest garlic in June in Prince William County. Depending on where you are in the world, that may be a little bit different. And we want to harvest when the lower leaves have turned brown, but the upper half still remain green. And we harvest the whole plant, roots, shoots, everything. We want to save the biggest bulbs. We want to put those aside because we want to save those to plant the following year. Garlic needs to be cured. Basically what that means is it needs to have some drying time to it so that the outer coat is thicker and more protective of the bulbs inside, or excuse me, the individual cloves inside. So as we go to the curing process, basically we just want to knock off the big clumps of soil. We want to put them in a warm place that's got good airflow. We leave them in that state for about a month, and then you end up with garlic that looks kind of like this in the picture. And that's when we trim off the shoots. That's when we trim off some of the roots, and we save the cloves. And so again, this is garlic ready for harvest, and this is what we end up with after the curing process is done. And that'll help the garlic store for long periods of time. Cover crops are another option if you have no idea what you want to plant and you want to do something for your garden. Cover crops are a good way to protect the soil. Depending on which cover crops you use, you can be adding some nutrients, you can be scavenging nutrients, but it's a good way to build soil health. And if you don't have anything else to plant or you're not sure what to plant, cover crops are a great option. Cover crops would include things like crimson clover, as is pictured here with our cover crop cat marmalade. In the foreground, there's a little bit of vetch. Over here, all of this red is crimson clover. There are other options such as cereal rye, winter wheat, daikon radishes, lots of different options. And if you are interested in going the cover crop route, please let us know and we can get you more information on that and potentially get you cover crop seed as well. A little bit more about some of our cover crops that we typically use in our area. Daikon radishes, they're good for opening up the soil. If you've got dense clay, daikon radishes are good at breaking that up. Typically what happens is you plant them early, you get a lot of this top growth, green top growth. When we get a hard frost or freeze, the top growth dies and it forms a weed suppressing mat. In the meantime, as the winter goes along, the roots themselves are decomposed by microorganisms, which helps create channels in the soil. It also feeds the microbial system, and it helps with nutrient cycling. Daikons we can plant really early, like late July into about mid-September. You could still plant them now. The problem with planting them now is you may not get the top growth to give you good weed suppression. That's the only trick with that. Some of the grasses, cereal rye, winter wheat, you could plant as a cover crop. You could keep these and get the berries and, harvest those. They are edible. They take a little bit of processing, but that's an option. or you can just leave them until you're ready to put in your spring plants. These are really great because if there's any extra nitrogen floating around in the soil, grasses will suck them up and hold on to them until the spring. They're really good for weed suppression. They're really good for erosion control. Typically, winter wheat is a little more sensitive, but with cereal rye, you can plant them well into the fall. So there have been times where I've planted cereal rye as late as Christmas time, and it still does fine. Typically with our grasses, what's going to happen is they're going to grow for a little bit, and then they're going to get hit with winter dormancy. And then when it warms up in the spring, they're going to spring back up and start growing. Typically, we don't let grasses go to maturity, full maturity, dropping seeds and all of that. Usually, depending on when we're putting in our first crop, we're going to cut those down. And if they're mature enough and we cut those down, that'll be it. If we have to do it a little bit earlier, we'll cut those down, put black plastic over that for a week or two, and then we'll be ready to plant into it. Legumes are very versatile. They're things like crimson clover and winter peas and the vetches. And we have in order crimson clover over here. This is common vetch in the middle, and then Austrian winter peas here on the right. And they do a really good job of adding nitrogen to the soil. And so they might be a plant that you want to put in a spot where you have a heavy nitrogen feeder this summer or this fall. They are an excellent food source for pollinators. They can be really good at weed suppression, especially vetch. And their peak biomass is about May, although we can cut them down earlier if we need to. So those are your options cover crop wise. And like I said, if you need more information on cover crops, please let us know, and I'll be happy to get you more information and possibly some seed for it as well. We've got a number of vegetables that we're kind of on the cusp of, maybe, maybe not, depending on how the weather goes. Turnips, beets, collards, kale, short season carrots, they're all possibilities. Turnips probably more than the others because we're closer to the end of their planting window. But you can do a number of things that will make these viable options. So we go back to the calendar. We're stuck here, right? Beginning of October, end of September. Only got what we've talked about already as options. But we still, still want to have a good garden this fall. Are we too late? Well, the answer is maybe. There are ways that we can work around this calendar to kind of turn back time, if you will, to allow us to grow vegetables that we may not technically be able to in terms of it's past their planting time. So let's look at a few of those. So one is to take advantage of microclimates. And what I mean by that is that, okay, the average first frost in Prince William County is usually somewhere mid to the end of October. Well, that varies throughout the county, but it also varies in your individual neighborhoods. And it varies in different parts of your yard. If you've got a warmer spot in your yard, like up against the house, that microclimate up against the house generally is going to be warmer than planting something, say, out here in the middle of the yard. Is it on the south side of the house? Is it on the north side of the house? Lots of different things that we can do to kind of fine-tune that microclimate to allow us to have a little bit more time to plant the vegetables that we want. Another option is to consider starts instead of seed. A lot of times you can find them discounted here at the end of the season, but putting in more mature plants that have already been planted, that helps roll back that clock, helps push us back, because if they've already been planted here in August and September, we're just putting them out. So they can have a healthy, mature, good stand as well. We can put plants in pots and bring those inside. We do need to think about the humidity, how much heat they're going to get. Are they going to get enough light? And we do have to be cautious of when we take plants from outside inside, are there any critters with them that we don't really want, particularly insect pests? Microgreens and sprouts are something that a lot of people haven't had a lot of experience with, but they're easy to grow, and basically they're highly nutritious, and basically you're taking advantage of young growth. You do want to use seeds that are produced specifically for sprouting. It reduces the possibility of some pathogens. You don't want E. coli or salmonella, and those are, if you just use any old seed, that's a possibility. Never use treated seed, because that's bad news in all sorts of ways if you ingest it. So let's take a look at how that works. The difference between sprouts and microgreens basically is at what stage of growth are we planting. Sprouts are first stage of development. We harvest those at a few days to when they get their first leaves. Microgreens are technically the second stage of development. Usually we harvest them at 1 to 2 weeks after the true leaves have developed. And it's a similar process for both of them. With sprouts, you're going to use a bag or a tray or a jar. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to pour seeds in, going to pour water in, let them soak for a while, rinse that out, and do that on a daily basis until they start to sprout and you're ready to eat them. Now with sprouts, we can consume the entire plant, roots, shoots, everything. Microgreens, on the other hand, we only harvest the shoots and the leaves. Microgreens require some sort of soilless media, like potting soil, a shallow tray. A grow light is very helpful with these. Typically, we want to water them from the bottom. And there are lots of different seeds that you can get microgreens from. If we look at the picture here, I don't even know what all of these are. We've got some clovers in there. We've actually got some lettuce back there. That I want to say looks like the start of some grasses. Here we've got a different type of clover. Over here, this looks like actually like there's some lettuce in there mixed with a few other things. So you can get straight varieties, or you can get combination of varieties. Your local garden center should have seeds for sprouting and microgreens, or you can get them online from the seed companies. And when we harvest microgreens, what we're doing is we're going to use clean scissors and we're going to cut at the base of the plant. We're going to consume that top part, and the bottom part we're going to hopefully compost or discard in some way. Another option are season extenders, and they include things like hoop houses, low tunnels, cold frames, hot boxes, cloches. And basically what you're doing is you're creating an insulated microclimate to grow your plants in, to help protect them from the cold and keep them going a little bit longer. Depending on what you're growing and how your season extender, which season extender you use, you can theoretically be planting throughout the winter time in these. And so this is just an example of some of them. This is a cold frame with lettuce growing in it. This is a diagram of a hot box, which is basically a cold frame with heat underneath, heat mat. This is an example of a high tunnel. Over here in the lower left, this is an example of a low tunnel. A low tunnel basically is anything, can be anything from about chest height or lower. It's basically the same thing as a high tunnel. You just can't walk in it. And these are handy for creating a layer of insulation. The air is acting as insulation and help protect at night from really cold temperatures. Another option to think about is maybe using black plastic. Black plastic is going to warm the ground during the day. It can't really protect at night, but some of that warm energy is going to be soaked up in the soil. It's going to be slowly released at night, and that will help a little bit with battling the cold and extending your season. Black plastic can be expensive and it can be a waste issue. Those are the downsides of that. But you can use this in combination. For example, you could put plastic down inside a cold frame to help with heat absorption during the day. The tricky thing is with cold frames and our other things is you want to vent them during the day so they don't get too hot. If you have this super hot and the lid is on and it stays on all day, then you can actually cook your vegetables, which is not a good thing. So weather is going to play a role in what you can do. This calendar is based on averages. And it's not necessarily true for your yard. If we get a mild winter, or excuse me, a mild fall, then we can extend the season just naturally. If we get a really bad fall, doesn't matter how early we planted, we could run into problems. So far, it looks like we have a pretty mild fall, so planting can still go on pretty much at least following the calendar. You know, some years we've been able to plant into November just because it's so mild. Unfortunately, weather is kind of roulette and we can't forecast accurately far enough to know for sure, hey, if I plant this now, it's going to be okay without any interventions. So that's why season extenders are a good option to think about. So is everybody ready to plant their garden? I encourage you to try and grow a garden this fall. Again, I know it's late, but I think it can be done with some of the strategies we've talked about today. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Well, I hope it didn't seem too doom and gloom. There really are options this late in the fall, and you shouldn't be afraid to try a fall garden this late.
We have a question, Thomas.
Sure.
Robin asked, how would a greenhouse affect these times?
So a greenhouse is basically, we'll go back up here. A greenhouse is a high tunnel that actually has heat with it. And so just like a high tunnel, it will extend that season because it will protect. With a greenhouse, typically you're running heat at night. So in addition to the insulative power of what you have in just the high tunnel part, you're actually adding heat. So you can go really far into the winter when it gets really, really cold. But it really takes a greenhouse that has good insulation and that has a heater that's sized correctly for the greenhouse.
Anne said, I live in California. Would I simply use the general ideas presented and adapt it to my area's growing season?
Yes, yes. And depending on where you are in California, some of this may not apply at all because if you're in Southern California, usually you don't have to worry too much about this. My nephews live in LA and 60 is a freezing day for them. But if you're in Northern California, yeah, you would apply just the same general principles. I would encourage you to get a hold of California Extension for growing guides so you can see when things are supposed to be planted. But yeah, these principles apply regardless of where you are.
Any other questions?
Well, again, please don't be overly concerned about it being as late in the season as it is. Like I say, there are all sorts of ways that we can push time back a little bit. We get weather can help us. season extenders, bringing things inside, those are all good strategies. One strategy I mentioned in passing with carrots, but it's the same is true with any other vegetable. If you look for short season varieties, a lot of times, even though we're, beginning of October, if you have a short enough season variety, it can get to maturity before we start getting heavy frosts, and you can still get a crop out of that.
I know I've used season extenders and have gotten broccoli as well as spinach and carrots and that well into January.
Yeah, and it really depends on your season extender and when you plant it. And there's some crops that are better in the fall. Like Brussels sprouts and cauliflower generally grow better in the fall, although you've got to start them, in August. And Brussels sprouts, for example, they need a frost to take some of the bitterness out of them. So, Jackie, I see your question about where do you get short season varieties. I'd look in seed catalogs. We won't be mailing out a copy of the presentation slides, but we will put this up on YouTube. And so you'll have that able to view that. We'll be sending out the link probably later this week. Trying to think of anything else. But if you can't get the link, and just email Master Gardener email, and we'll work it out. Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully we will see you all next time. Next week, we are putting your flower gardens to bed for the winter. And after that, I believe we have ground covers in 2 weeks. So
Seed saving and ground covers are the next two classes.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and have a good week. If you enjoyed this video, please let us know with your questions, comments, and suggestions for other classes and videos. For more information on lawns and gardens, please contact the Extension Horticulture Help Desk at mastergardener@pwcva.gov. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.